So thank you very much. I'm sorry that there seems to have been technology problems, but let's start. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk about curriculum development today. So what is a curriculum? A curriculum can be simply defined as the total learning experience of the learner. And usually the curriculum is explicit. Somebody states this is what an individual should learn, but also it's more than just the content we present, it's how we present it, plus all the support, plus all the resources. And I'm going to go through that a little bit later about the explicit curriculum and how we can actually develop that. There's also the implicit curriculum. This is the culture of the learning environment. This is absolutely essential to create an appropriate learning environment because motivation is at the heart of all education. If the learner is not motivated to learn, the learner will not learn. And although the learner, we can blame the learner, we need to be able to create the environment which enables the learner to actually be motivated. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. There's also what's known as the hidden curriculum. This is what is unintended and emergent. So, for example, a few years ago, I ran quite a long time ago now, I ran a faculty development workshop in the Sudan, and all the professors were assembled, but there were also some medical students, and we were talking about the use of technology, and they were all saying how much the students liked the e-learning system that they were using, and all the students would use it. And if you looked at the e-learning system, it was basically only PowerPoint slides. But actually, well, I got the medical students to talk of how they used technology to help them to learn. And the students were actually searching the internet for YouTube videos. So actually, there was a hidden curriculum there. The hidden curriculum was very clearly related to how the students had decided that they wanted to learn, and it was unintended by the educators. So a curriculum at the top can be just a simple one-off learning experience. That is still a curriculum. Every time we teach, if we run a session like this, a small presentation, or something which is a bit longer, we still have a curriculum. Typically, a curriculum is thought to be over a period of time and is usually a series of components which build up to a whole. That's the typical medical school course, which is a modular curriculum. So it's in discrete modules of topics and sections. There's increasing interest in what's called a spiral curriculum, where one module builds on a previous module. And that's one of the main reasons why students in a modular system need to acquire that information, because it's going to be revisited again at a later date. So they need to have that original understanding to benefit from the course. Whereas the typical modular curriculum is quite distinct units. So what's the best curriculum? Well, the best curriculum is that which will enable the learners to learn, but also with the resources that you have. And we're going to come back to the aspect which is related to your philosophy of the curriculum. So one of the most important aspects of any curriculum is to align it, the product, the process, and the philosophy. So the product is what you expect at the end of a particular educational experience, what you expect the learner to have acquired in knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And these are often called the intended learning outcomes, the ILO, or quite simply often just learning outcomes. So we need to be very clear what the learning outcomes are. There's a process of crafting learning experiences so that the intended learning outcomes can be achieved by the student. But fundamental to any curriculum is our vision. And for me, at the moment, particularly in medical education, there are three big challenges. One is education as an outcome or a process. Virginia Savard talks about this. Do we have a major focus on what is an outcome? In other words, are we just delivering content? Or do we want learners to have developed particular skills, which is a process? And I know this is splitting it into outcome or process. Ideally, we should have both, because we need to develop our learners in a particular way. So if we want our learners to become self-regulated learners, if we want our learners to have social interaction, act professionally with colleagues, that is more of a process rather than a specific outcome. It occurs by people interacting together, about being supported, about reflecting on what they're doing. Well, that's not necessarily the outcome of teaching an anatomy session. So the anatomy of the lung or the heart, that you can build up other aspects, which are the learning processes about how to show respect to each other, how to take responsibility. There's also educational training. I often say that training is what we do to animals. This is a circus, getting them to jump through a hoop. And often education can be just getting people to pass through an exam. But education is much more, it's much wider. It's about helping individuals to develop themselves, to develop confidence, to become future global citizens. And that links into the much wider issue at the moment of flourishing, which is enabling individuals to become physically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually well, to improve their well-being across all those dimensions. And that is really a key vision for education. And I think that depends, because if you want your students to flourish, you need to concentrate not just on the explicit curriculum, but also on the implicit curriculum. How do they have relationships with staff? And I'm talking of all staff here. Are they welcomed? Do they witness, can they see professional attitudes and behaviours being displayed by the staff? Are students expected to take responsibility for themselves and for others? All this is so important. And an important aspect of curriculum alignment is to be aware of what your intended learning outcomes are. And this is Bloom's taxonomy. But as you can see, do you want students to only be able to recall facts and basic concepts? Do you want them to be able to explain it? Can they transfer that information? Can they apply it? Do you want them to be able to justify what they're doing and why they're doing it? And do you want them to be able to do original work? Because if we want students to only recall facts, our crafting of the learning experience needs to be different to that, where we want the students to be able to justify and make it and compare and contrast. For me, curriculum alignment are those three core principles on the left. Our aims should be linked to the methods, which are the learning activities, and we need assessment. Assessment is crucial for all learners. It's assessment of learning and assessment for learning. As an educator, we need to understand how our learning activities have been achieved by the student, but also students themselves need to know, because if you or the student is not aware, the learner aware that they've achieved these ends, how are they going to be able to move forwards and apply that information? And then a key aspect of assessment is feedback. The feedback is extremely important. In fact, if I've put there the effect sizes, if you want to look at Hattie's work, and John Hattie's work has got a website, you will see that feedback is one of the greatest, one of the most effective approaches to improving education. And you can only give feedback if you as an educator have some form of assessment. This might be just a mental quick assessment. I think they're doing okay. You might give them a quiz at the end of the session. So curriculum alignment, for me, is that for each intended learning outcome, you have one or more learning activities. And for these learning activities, you need to have resources. So, for example, and this links to the work related to the Bloom's taxonomy, if you only want to give content delivery and you want people to only record it, you can give it as text, visual, or audio. It's important that there's not cognitive overload. So giving information in one or two is better than all three. Interaction, the self, active learning requires the application and understanding of content. Interaction, which is collaborative, as group work, which can be face-to-face or online. And production, where an individual has to present, and usually that means synthesize the information. So as we go from one to the other, one is predominantly could be tested for just recall. If we want understanding, to test for that and want students to develop understanding, they're going to have more active learning environments where they're doing things like quizzes, talking to others. And if they want to be applying it, they're going to have to start presenting information and creating new tools. So how do we decide which learning activities to use? There are best practice guidelines, such as the 12 Tips series in Medical Teacher. They're absolutely excellent for the AMY guides. It can be evidence-based, but for a lot of educational interventions, there isn't always the evidence that we want, particularly in different contexts, because a lot of the work that has been done in high-income countries with lots of resources. Whether that evidence can be easily applied to lower or middle-income country is a bit more debatable. But there should still be good practice guidelines which are based on educational theory. Experience is still important. It also is worthwhile thinking about learner preferences. And crafting an educational experience is complex. Education and teaching is a complex activity, because if we want it to work well, we need to consider the needs of the learner, both knowledge and with their particular abilities and interests. We need to have content. We need to have an instructional approach. We need to think about the teacher always. does the teacher actually have the skills, the enthusiasm? We talked about the learner being motivated, but the teacher needs to be motivated as well. And also the context is important. Is it going to be feasible to use, say, technology on a placement which is miles from anywhere, or resources that are available? So things like team-based learning can be heavily dependent on tutors, and the tutors need particular skills and training, and that might not be available within a particular context. If we are going to be crafting a learning experience, I'm particularly interested in using Gardner's instructional design model, and I've used this approach extensively in the past, especially for standalone online learning, because I was involved with developing an international Masters in Public Health course, and we didn't have any face-to-face teaching, and we had to provide modules online. So Gardner has gaining attention. So how do you gain an individual's attention? So we used to give something related to a topic which was in the news at the moment, or some startling facts. Did you know? Then tell the learners what they're about to learn, what the learning objectives are, because what that does, that gives them what's called a mental set. They frame, oh, this is what we're going to be learning. And then they can think about, what do I know already about that topic? You can give them a quiz beforehand. And many people do that. So with flipped learning, they can have some reading beforehand, but they can also do a quiz beforehand, so that when they come, they've already thought about, what do I know? What don't I know? So that they can focus their attention on what they don't know. And that can be quite surprising. Many people have heard of Ronald Harden, Professor Ronald Harden, and he used to be an endocrinologist. And he gives this tale that when he went to give this lecture on thyroid disease, he used to give the same lecture. He gave the students a quiz beforehand, and the students, the vast majority of the students, knew 90% of what he was going to be giving his talk on. So it was not good use of his time or the students' time to be going to that lecture. It would be far better to be discussing and talking about what students knew and didn't know. The stimulus then can be presented. That's the content. You might need to be able to provide some guidance, so you can point them in particular directions and what they should be focusing on in the learning. So then trying to elicit some performance by giving them a quiz. So you know and they know the extent to which they have been learning adequately. Have they understood what the content's about? And then you can give them feedback and then give them another test. And that's what we used to do each week on our modular master's program. So at the end of each week, we gave them a short quiz so that they could tell themselves how they were performing, but also we knew as tutors if there were any areas which they were finding difficult. And the other thing is about, and finally, is about helping them to think how they can transfer what they've learned to other contexts and use it in the future. And that can be a reflective point. Also, there's increasing interest in the divergency of the wide divergency in learners. So, for example, learners have different styles of learning or different preferences, I want to say. And there's debate whether students have a fixed style of learning, but certainly they have particular preferences. And an important aspect is to be recognizing that individual learners have differences in how they engage, how they prefer information to be presented, and how they wish to express their understanding. And this has been brought into a concept called universal design for learning. And if you look it up on the internet, you will find some excellent websites. And what it essentially is about is recognizing that there are individual learning differences, but also that there are multiple means of engagement to tap into their interests, challenges, and to motivate them. So knowing why students might be interested in learning about, say, diabetic ketoacidosis, it's important to try and make it interesting to that student. One way is to say, well, in 5 years' time, this is the type of patient you'll be managing. Or build on, have you seen a patient with diabetic ketoacidosis? What were the challenges? And that's what you then focus your teacher. Different learners have different ways of learning. Some prefer text, some prefer a lot of visual, some prefer to be doing things. And also, how can students express what they know? So, for example, we tend to use a lot of text as the way of assessment, but there are alternatives. Students can do presentations where there are images, and I've done work on using what's called digital storytelling, and some colleagues in Iraq that I've supported, and they've been doing that as well. And we've used digital storytelling for reflection. Students like it, they enjoy doing it. And basically, this is a creation of small digital stories using animated PowerPoints to describe their thoughts and feelings. It doesn't have to be textual. And that comes into Howard Gardner's work, which is about, he talks about the multiple intelligences. What he says is that each of us has particular preferences for how we learn. And we don't tend to have all of them, but we often have several, but each individual has a different mix. We've done some work a few years ago with medical students, and I'm sure the same as with doctors. And doctors actually prefer to be doing things, or like doing things, bodily kinesthetic, they like activity. They also like to do visual things. So they've got a preference for visual, spatial, the bodily kinesthetic. Some people do like verbal, they like reading. So it's about how do you manage that. There's also musical. Some people learn well by having music. Why not get students to create something which is musical, a song about something? And I've put nature there. There's a lot of work in the UK at the moment, and in America and in Europe, which talks about the use of forest schools. So children learn better when they are put into the natural environment. So some of their teaching occurs there. And I know that some medical schools, particularly in Scandinavia, have started to alter their architecture so that there's much greater amount of nature. And in fact, we did a conference recently, and for discussion, we did several workshops. And one of the workshops on offer was a discussion about a topic. And instead of being in a lecture theatre, I did it as what I called a walk and talk. Where I work at Edge Hill University, it's in a lovely green campus with lakes. And what I did was to walk around the campus. Fortunately, it was a nice day and it wasn't raining or too hot or windy. And we were able to walk around as a small group, 30 of us, and I would stop every so often and we would talk. We have geese there. You can see rabbits on the campus. And people really enjoy that opportunity to get outside a lecture theatre or a small group room and to talk in nature, with nature around them. Also, and finally, I'm going to give a view of the curriculum development cycle, which is about planning, implementing, and evaluate. And it's this constant process that if you are going to be developing a new curriculum, you need to plan it and implement it. A lot of research has shown that if you want a successful curriculum, you need to be able to co-create it with all the stakeholders. So that can be administrators, the faculty staff, the people who can teach, the people who are responsible for planning the programme, the managers, the deans, plus the students, plus anyone else that's going to be involved, such as clinicians or nurses, because if they're expected to be part of it and you want it to work, these people need to have a say. They need to have a say in what should be taught, how it should be taught, and the resources that are available. And it stops you from having unrealistic expectations about the student, what they can learn, how they can learn it, and the resources that will be available to those students. It's often an iterative process. So you'll have one meeting, you share it, you create it a bit more. And usually any curriculum development will require some degree of faculty development so that people can provide those learning experiences to the student in a more effective way. And finally, we need to evaluate our curriculum on a regular basis. Is our curriculum fit for purpose? We can do simple things like what do the students find it particularly useful, ease of use? Can they find the information if we want them to be doing things? Do they like using technology? Do they like this? That's all really important because an individual's reaction and perceptions are key to their motivation. And if students are not motivated, they don't engage with the learning process. So understanding and responding to these aspects are really important. Have they actually achieved the intended learning outcomes? We need to be measuring that, and our assessments need to be aligned to our intended learning outcomes. Are they able to apply it? So it's not just about having exams which are factual recall, but they also need to have exams and assessments which are created to show how they integrate information. And if we've got those loose higher hierarchy things which we're looking for that they can analyze, we need to be getting them to be doing presentations, doing other types of project work. And ultimately, in the healthcare context, is about thinking about results. What is the impact on patient care? Excuse me. So overall, what I've tried to do is to provide an overview of curriculum development, both its philosophy, its processes, but also the faculty development and implementation process. I am available for a few questions, but because we're running late, I've actually got another meeting in about 5 minutes' time. So I'm going to have, I'm going to have to be quite limited. I'm sorry.
Thank you, John. It's Shabi again. Most grateful to you, despite all the difficulties, technical hitches and everything. You have been kind as always to deliver a wonderful, remarkable, memorable lecture. Thank you. And I think Suchita will now
Yes.
conclude and
Thank
we'll
you.
meet again.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, John. Always a pleasure, and there's so much that we learned right from the curriculum being explicit, implicit, and hidden. And yes, you did make us think a lot about what the hidden curriculum entails. And for me, also, it's an area that I would like to work on, and I've already begun thinking on how can we really tap this and also maybe move ahead into check. I liked your observation of how the students, immediately wanted to look at the videos on Google, and for that being a part of the culture and that being a part of the hidden curriculum. So that's explicitly explained, in a very brief way, what we should be thinking when we think of hidden curriculum. Also, that when we talk about curriculum planning, we need to plan, implement, and evaluate. And all this has made us richer today. Thank you so much, John. And I hope that the recording will be available so that all of us can have a hear and look at the whole session once more, because it was so complete and it's helped me to learn a lot myself. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, I wanted to ask two questions. If you did, it's just left, it says, so I'm sorry. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best and have a great day today. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Bye all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Suchita. Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.